So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we're going to give you a static review of the Yadea C1S, imported by Lexmoto, and more of a sort of size comparison rather than anything else. We're putting it alongside an NIU MQI Plus Sport, and then another Yadea bike which we've reviewed already called a G5. And we're just going to go around the bike, show you some things about it, just explain some of the setup, and hopefully that will help you make an informed decision. So let's get to it. So a little bit about Yadea themselves firstly. So Yadea are out of China, unsurprisingly. They have sold an awful lot of two-wheelers, not just push bikes but also kick scooters and mopeds. So they seem to be consolidating their range a little bit right now, especially in this sort of side of it. They're only showing 3 models on their moped range at the moment, so these two plus one called a Y1S, which we don't have. But within those models there will be Pro versions, so there is a C1S Pro and there is a G5 Pro, although again we don't get them. So yeah, represented in 80 countries, 35,000 outlets, 50 million units in their lifetime that they have shifted. Okay, so quite a few. I guess the main thing about this C1S is actually the design of it itself. Okay, so as you can see, I mean I guess the G5 is a little bit more traditional in how it looks, and people are now used to the NIU, and all NIU bikes will have the halo light. This halo light here, which you'll see on things like the MQI GT in the background, their N series as well. They all have standardized on that. Yadea are not doing that, other than the fact that their logo is here. This is the Yadea, and that's here. But they're not standardizing on a light front like NIU have done. Okay, but obviously their choice. Okay, so as you see from the front of it, it is pretty wide, the actual bike itself. Obviously the handlebars are still going to be pretty similar, but the actual body of it is quite wide. Okay, so obviously that means a bit more protection. If you're thinking of putting it on a camper van, though, you might think again, simply because of the width of it. But it's sort of like a love it or hate it thing. But the length of the bike is about 1.79 meters long. So if you look, it's just a little bit longer than a G5, and obviously bigger than an N+. As I said, we only really are putting this side by side with this one because of the size comparison. This would really be more comparable to an NQI Sport, because it's a 28 mile an hour bike, L1E license. Okay, but just for sort of that appearance alone, I thought it would be good to stick it next to something like an M. Okay, so if you like that sort of design, then that's obviously a good thing. So starting at the front of the bike, we've got 12-inch wheels. Okay, so just as a comparison, that's an MQI 10-inch wheel. Okay, ventilated discs. Interestingly, the disc is different to that sort of disc on the G5, but there you go. So a single caliper, so just front brake on one lever, back brake on another lever, no CBS or combined braking, which is fine because that's not a requirement of 28 mile an hour bikes. And here you go at the back, same thing again, ventilated disc. Okay, now the motor, as we're down here, is quite an interesting thing as well, I suppose, because of its rating. Okay, so we've talked about this before. There are different ratings on motors, readings on motors. You've got the base power, as in the power that you get when you turn it on. Then you've got the continuous power, which is the power that they measure for the V5 to sort of standardize everybody. And then you've got maximum power. Okay, so on this bike, the base power is 1.8 kilowatt. Okay, so just to compare that to this bike, this is 1.2 kilowatt. To compare it to an NQI Plus Sport, that's 1.5 kilowatt. So it's a little bit more powerful. Okay, on the continuous power, it is 2.2 kilowatts. So again, an MQI would be 1.4 kilowatts continuous. Okay, and an N would be something like 1.8, I think. So again, a little bit more powerful. It's also a little bit more powerful than this G5 as well. It doesn't actually say what its maximum power is on the spec, but if it's 2.2 continuous, it's going to be about 2.5, 2.6 kilowatts maybe. As we've said before, 750 watts is 1 horsepower. Okay, so you're talking about 3-ish horsepower. Okay, which some people would say, well, that's not a lot, but remember, these motors are very efficient. Okay, you are getting 70, 80 odd % of that horsepower delivered to the rear wheel, unlike petrol, which wastes 70 to 80% through heat and noise and stuff like that. Okay, so 2.2 kilowatts continuous, let's say 3 horsepower continuous. Okay, but it is a bit of a bigger bike. So for example, the M here is 72 kilos, this is 83 kilos. Okay, so a little bit more power, well, a fair bit more power, I guess, but 11 kilowatts heavier. Okay, when we're talking about batteries are actually stored under the floor of this bike. Okay, a bit like the G5. Okay, so if you compare sort of like foot space, again, wide, a lot of space for feet. Okay, and this is all for the rider. The passenger does have their own foot pegs, as you can see down there, so it is quite big on the floor space, which would mean you could, for example, have a bag hanging off there in the middle and still have your feet comfortably on it. So to get to the battery, you actually do it from this fob here, and I'll talk about the keys a little bit more in a little while. And the way you do it is you turn through the key lock. Okay, so now you can see I've put the steering lock on, rather, and I've kept turning the key, and then up pops this. Okay, so as you can see, another example of the width of the bike, that's the battery going sideways, and you've still got space for your feet. Okay, that is a 60 volt 32 amp hour Panasonic battery with 18650 cells. So one of the things that Yadea talk about on their website is they're looking into things like graphene batteries. Okay, so they're not sort of standing still, they are looking at sort of new technology, and they talk about how that would increase range and stuff like that. So they are looking into these sorts of ideas. Okay, that's just as an aside. Back to the batteries and charging. So this is the charger. It looks remarkably similar to an NIU charger, to be fair, which probably means the casing came from the same place. But it's 4 amp. You can see down here, 4 amp. So this battery will take about 8 hours from flat. Okay, so an overnight charge. Okay, not a problem, obviously, if you have the time, or if you get to the office, you want to charge it while at the office, you've got time within the working day to do that. Okay, quoted range is about 50, and I don't think it will do that. I think it's more comparable to an M or even an NQI Sport. Okay, so I think this is going to be more like 40. Okay, and that's what I would say to people. Don't expect 50, expect 40. Okay, so 8 hour charge, 40 mile range, 18650 Panasonic battery. Okay, under the floor. Of course, putting it under the floor means you have all of this space here. Okay, so this is 25 litres of space, and that is a full-faced large helmet. Okay, so this is where Yadea are winning, because even on like an NQI or an EK1 from Horwin, you can't really get a full-faced helmet under the seat. Okay, so you're forced to get a rack and a top box. This G5, by the way, has the same amount of space, in fact 1 litre more. So you can also get the helmet underneath there. Just show you that from here. Okay, so you've got the same thing. So they do think about this when they've designed these bikes, which is quite good in one respect, because on this G5 C1S they don't have a rack. Obviously they have this for the rear passenger to hold on, but we don't have a rack right now. We do now have a rack for the G5. Okay, if you wanted one, as well as having all that space. So this is one of the key advantages of going for a Yadea bike, is that you get this storage space for a helmet, and obviously you could also fit the charger in there by putting it inside your helmet, and then you could take both without the need of a rack. Okay, no other bikes that we're doing offer this much space built in. Okay, so that is one thing to think about. So going around the dashboard, so we have, you know, a fairly standard dash layout. You've got your two modes here, you've got your trip, you've got your total mileage and battery. It's in P, as you'd probably expect. You press the P button and then you're in ready. So when the ready's alights, the throttle is active, and here you go. So you get 23 without load in eco mode, and you should get your 28. Again, once you put load on it, that will be what it ends up at in sport. Okay, so that's slightly interesting in itself, because normally two-mode bikes, the first mode you hardly ever use because it's too slow. And I expect once you put a load on this, that 22 will probably go down to 16, 17, maybe 18 miles an hour. And would you ever really use that? Of course, if you're in a 20-mile limit, you could use the modes to make sure you don't go over 20 if you really wanted to do that. Okay, so going around the dash, so you've got your hazard lights, and as you see or hear, they have noise. You have your mode, you have cruise control, okay, which not many bikes have, and then you have your different lights and ways of setting. This allows you to set like from kilometers to miles to reset the trip and stuff like that. Then you've got your indicators, and you press the same side to cancel. Okay, and then you've got your horn. So around here you've got your bag hook for storing bags, and then within here you've got a USB for your phone, as you can see there, and then some little storage within that. Okay, so that's that. So the other thing to talk about obviously is security. So as you saw, there is a steering lock, and then you have this fob. So the key goes into the back of the fob, so it's quite a neat sort of fob, and there are different ways that the alarm can be set. Okay, you can set it like that, literally just by pressing the button in when you turn it off, and it does have the locking wheel idea, you know, where if you try and move it, it will actually lock the wheel. Obviously you can't do that here. You've also got on the fob the ability to find the bike. If you hold this button for more than a few seconds, it will find the bike. So if you know, if there's a stack of these in a car park and you need to find your bike, then that can be useful. Okay, all right, so that's basically the features. That there is Yadea in general are talking about an app, but it's only in Chinese right now, so not really an option for us over here. That means obviously no tracking, but you can add tracking into any bike really, just by connecting to the 12 volt. So although NIU and Super Socko come with that standard, any bike can have a tracking app connected. Okay, so as for colours, it is this sort of shiny grey, although it is a matte grey, and then you have a matte black. The price is 209999, so 2100, which puts it sort of in an interesting place. So it's obviously more, well, it's not obviously, but it is more than the G5, and that's the power thing that's getting you there, I suppose, because it's got a more powerful motor, exactly the same battery, and probably therefore about the same range, although probably a little less on the C1S, just because it's got a more powerful motor. So 2100. So compare that to, for example, an MQI Plus, which is 2156 after the promotion has finished. Okay, so 2156 for an MQI Plus. If you compared it to a EK1 from Horwin over there, that's 2400. If you compared it to an NQI Plus Sport, that's also 2400. So 2100 for a battery after the grant, so it is on the grant. So you're getting the 3-year warranty on the battery and the 2-year warranty on the bike. So again, what they've done is they've made a bike that is, you know, maybe the quality might not be as good as an NIU or a Super Socko or even a Horwin, but it's ticking a lot of boxes, especially with the storage. Okay, so if you want to obviously organise a test ride, then please let us know. I hope you found that useful, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel to be updated of this and other reviews, and thanks very much.